This is a sculpture of Jenna Ortega, and it's actually for a wax figure where she's standing on the red carpet, kind of looking over her shoulder in a classic red carpet pose. So you'll see as it progresses that her eyes are kind of going off to the side because she's looking over her shoulder in a dramatic angle. So you can see here I've just blocked out the main skull structure, as I always do. And once that's in place, then I like to look at the photos from a 3/4 angle, and I'm looking at that outside shape of the whole silhouette of her face in 3/4, and I'm adding on where it needs to be added on. So you can see here I've added on a bit onto her eye socket, and then I'm adding on some onto her cheekbone and just filling in that area down from her cheekbone towards her chin. And then I'm filling out the muzzle area, which is the area around the mouth there as well, looking from the furthest away side. Now you can see I'm looking from the other 3/4 angle, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm looking at that outside edge and trying to match it to the photo. Jenna Ortega's got great bone structure, so she's really a pleasure to sculpt because you can just see all that form very clearly on the surface. And as well as the furthest away side, I also like to have a look at the side closest to me, so the shape of the jaw, and I'm just gathering information all the time. And then once I'm happy with that basic structure, I like to get the ears on. And because I'm working from photos, I've located the ears by looking at my front and my profile pictures, and I actually draw a grid onto it. And this is a technique that I learned when I was working at the Wax Museum. And I teach this method in my online course, Building Blocks. If you want to know it in great detail, it's quite technical. Once I've modelled on one ear, then I'm turning it round and looking at the other ear. And then once they're both modelled in, I'll have a look from the front and make sure that they're sticking out the right amount. This is one of my favourite tools. It's a curve-ended tool, and it's useful for modelling difficult to get to shapes. You can see here I've actually put on the whole grid, and that helps me to locate where the eyeballs go. So it helps me to make sure that they're exactly the right height on her face, because if someone's eyes are too high or too low on their face, then it throws off the whole likeness. So you can see I'm modelling in the actual ball of the eyeball first, and I will get that to be the right depth looking from the side before I then model in the actual eye lids on the top and the bottom. Jenna Ortega's got very distinctive shaped eyes, so it's important to get them right. She's got quite thick eyelids and very defined eye socket shapes. So you can see here I'm just squidging on a flattened clay sausage and then modelling it in to make the upper eyelid. And then I'm filling in the area above the eye towards the top of the eye socket. So I just get a bit of clay and I put it onto my wooden tool, and then I smear it on into the right position. But I try to do everything in quite a controlled way so that I'm not just putting on clay and then scraping it off and then putting it on, scraping it off. You have to be quite decisive about where you want the clay to go at each stage. So it's just exactly the same process. I usually put on the bottom lids first and then put in the top lid, and then fill in that area between the upper lid and the eye socket, and the area below the bottom lid down towards the cheekbone. And then just blend in what I've just done a bit so that I can see exactly what I've got. When I'm sculpting a young, beautiful lady like Jenna Ortega, the forms are so subtle, you can't leave it too sketchy, or it's very hard to see exactly what you've got. When you're sculpting someone older and more craggy, you can leave things a bit rougher and you can still see all the shapes. But when it's very subtle shapes, it's easier to see what you've got if you smooth it off a bit more. And this is a twisted loop tool I use, which is useful for unifying shapes. And now you can see that eye position already. The direction that someone is looking impacts the whole shape of the eye. It's not just that you make a generic eye shape and then put in the eyeballs facing the way that you want. It affects the whole shape of the eye, because where your iris is actually a raised dome on top of your eyeball, so that's called the corneal bulge, and that pushes out the upper and lower lid in the direction that you're looking. So even if I were to fill in someone's eyes when they're looking in an extreme direction like this, you'd still be able to tell what direction they were looking. It can be really helpful to look up at your sculpture for this, to see the shape of the eyeball, so that you want to check that the eyeball itself is round, and then the direction that they're looking is a slightly more pushed out bit. Here again, I'm just using a guitar string tool, which is a good unifying tool, just made of an old guitar string and some brass tubing, and that helps to get a smooth surface. And then a thumb is always really useful as well, or a finger, to help blend the clay. So once I feel happy that it's working from underneath, then sometimes I'll bring it back down to eye level. And all the time you're just trying to look from as many different angles and from as many different photographs as you can find of the person, so that it's working from every angle. And at this point I like to sketch in some hair. You can see I've just covered up the area where it's going to be covered in hair with some cling film, and then I'll take that off at the end, because this is going to be cast in wax eventually. It will be cast totally bald so that the real hair can be inserted. now I'm really modelling some of the forms a bit more precisely, and I often use a loop tool like this to carve in, and you can use it to actually model the shapes as well. And then there's a wooden tool as well. Just going around the forms and trying to make everything very precise and definite. This is another guitar string tool that I'm using to get some of those subtle shapes. And then by this stage I'm really just trying to get the surface as smooth and lifelike as possible, without any little dinks or giveaways that it's clay rather than skin. At this point I've attached it onto the neck so that it will sit onto the body of the wax figure, and you can see how she's really twisting her head round. This hair was copied from pictures from when she was at the premiere for Beetlejuice, or Beetlejuice should I say. And that's it, she's finished.